Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Dylan Ryder from the Johnson County Library's Career and Finance Committee. Thank you for joining us for Women in Money Mondays. We have the privilege to be joined by Rogers Brazier from the Housing and Credit Counseling, Inc., who will be sharing information on budgeting. But first, I'd like to take a quick moment to ask you a few poll questions. If you could please share with us how you came across this program, as well as your home zip code. That information is a huge help to us in terms of marketing, planning, and knowing whom we're helping. While you're answering those poll questions, I'd like to offer you a quick tour of the different windows on your screen. First off, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, click on the Help widget, where you can find system requirements and FAQs. Usually, most issues can be resolved simply by refreshing your browser. If that doesn't fix your issue, please send us a note through the Q&A window. If you have any questions for our speaker during the webcast, and we sure hope you do, you can submit them through that same Q&A window at any time. We'll try to answer a few of those questions following the presentation. We've also added some additional budget assistance tools. Those are available in the resource list window, so feel free to bookmark those items to review following the program. Last but not least, your screen is completely customizable. You can resize any of the windows and move them around, so feel free to adjust as needed to get the most out of your desktop space. If you accidentally close any of your windows, you can bring them back up by clicking the appropriate widget down at the bottom of your screen. And now, I'd like to turn things over to JCL's Careers and Personal Finance Librarian, Marty Johannes. Good evening, Marty.
Hi, Dylan. Thank you all for joining us for this Money Mondays webinar to hear Rogers Brazier, Certified Financial Counselor with HCCI, share his expertise on creating and managing a household budget. The Women in Money series was developed by Housing and Credit Counseling, Inc. Johnson County Library has been partnering with HCCI since 2014 to make this series available to our community each year in the fall. And this year, recognizing that men and women alike could benefit from this information, especially during these challenging times, we decided to make this series inclusive to all and to rebrand it with a new logo. Due to COVID-19, the entire series is being offered online. One silver lining of the pandemic preventing us from meeting in person and forcing us to go virtual is that we're able to expand our reach beyond our metro area. And we're also able to make the recordings of the online programs available to those registrants who aren't able to join us live. The link for this recording will be made available to registrants, and it'll be accessible to you all for 48 hours. This program is the fourth of 9 programs in the Women in Money Mondays series. To see a full schedule, go to the HCCI website. Registration for the individual programs will open up in mid-December on the Johnson County Library website at jocolibrary.org. And now I'm going to turn it over to Marilyn Stanley, the Executive Director of HCI, to say a few words and to introduce our speaker. Marilyn?
Thank you, Marty. So good to have everyone join us on this Monday evening. I hope we're all staying warm. First, I'd like to tell you just a little bit more about what Housing and Credit Counseling does. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is to counsel and educate all people to achieve their housing and financial goals. That can include one-on-one counseling for things such as budgeting, like you're going to learn more about tonight with Rogers. It can include credit report, credit building, repaying medical debt, student loan repayment options, debt repayment, mortgage default or foreclosure, which could be something that we anticipate we'll see more of with COVID in the months to come after the moratorium is over. We also help people with tenant and landlord issues. We provide information and options based on the Kansas Residential Landlord Tenant Act, fair housing, and local city codes and ordinances. And then we also help people with the entire home ownership process, including some down payment assistance money that we receive from a grant through the Federal Home Loan Bank, TICA. And then we provide education classes on all of those subject matters. Last year in 2019, we served over 7,000 Kansans between education and counseling. So we want to be here for you. It is our wheelhouse. Let us help you. Our HUD certified counselors have great experience and credentials to be able to help you through all of those matters. And I want to next acknowledge our sponsors for this program. The Women and Money program is sponsored by the Office of the State Bank Commissioner, the Kansas Securities Commission, and, all right, losing my screens here. I apologize. And then various other sponsors as well. Now, again, we couldn't do it without the Johnson County Library. As you see, all of this technology here is thanks to them. Next, most importantly, I want to introduce you to Rogers. Rogers has been, just a very pleasant person to be around in our organization. When he came to us and he took under his wing, he is our budgeting guru. He is the one that he's just passionate about budgeting. And absolutely, in the end, as you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask him anything at all. He's not only a budgeting guru, but he's also the student loan repayment person. There's very few organizations nationwide that are as expertise as he is in those options. So I am very happy to introduce you to Rogers. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to talk about creating and managing let me get my screens up here. Creating and managing a household budget. And for some of you, this may be something you've never tried before, or maybe you've tried pieces of budgeting. But we're going to go through the process this evening, step by step, in how to do it correctly. And if you do it correctly, it's very, very effective in terms of managing the household resources. So agenda-wise tonight, we're going to talk about what is a budget, then our planning for spending and saving. We're going to use our budget for making sure that we have our savings in place. Goal setting, that is a big piece of budgeting, and putting together our plan, setting forth our longer term, midterm, short-term goals. We'll also touch on savings accounts. A lot of the people I work with may have one savings account, but it's pretty important that we have multiple savings accounts, and we'll talk about why. We'll touch on income and expenses, the two pieces of a budget. Projected income, projected expenses, actual expenses. And then the two pieces of the budgeting process, creating the budget and then managing the budget. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about budget forms. So what is a budget? It's simply a written plan for the disbursement of every dollar I think I'm going to get during a defined period of time. And in this case, a 1 month period of time. It's something in writing. What are we going to bring in during that 1 month period of time, and what are we going to do with the money that we receive? That's all a budget is. Now, we're also going to talk this evening about zero-based budgeting. You may have heard that term before. It's nothing complicated. It merely describes the process of estimating or projecting what our income is going to be for that 1 month period of time, and then balancing the projected income total with our projected expenditures for that 1 month period of time. And I use the terms projected income, projected expenditures, because when we build a budget, when we create the budget for the next month, we're going to be doing some guessing. We may be guessing at the income. We certainly are going to be guessing at some of the expenses. For example, the groceries, the utilities, the gasoline. There's some variable expenses that we have every month, but they're not the same every month. So we're going to be doing some guessing there. But keep in mind that when you build a budget, when you create a budget, it's okay. In fact, it's necessary to guess. The state of Kansas has to guess. The city of Overland Park has to guess. Johnson County has to guess. Your school districts have to guess. Everybody has to guess when they build a budget. Because you're projecting out next month, next year, what are we going to pay for utilities? Well, we don't know for sure. What's our income going to be? We don't know for sure necessarily, but we have an idea. We just make our best guess and we be conservative. We don't want to overestimate the income. We don't want to underestimate the expenditures. We just try to be as accurate as possible, as conservative as possible. One of the things that a budget can do for us also is it can act as a scorecard. And what I mean by that is say I build a budget for the month of December, and then I go through the month of December managing my budget. I get to the end of December, and I want to know how did I do actual income, actual receipts into my checking account versus what I expended. And if I'm doing my budget correctly, comprehensively, keeping track of everything, my budget's going to tell me as of December 31st, January 31st, February 28th, it's going to tell me on the last day of the month, did I expend more or less than what I brought in? And I need to know that because my goal for that 1 month period of time, now I'm going to have multiple goals built into my budget, and there's multiple benefits to budgeting. But for that 1 month period of time, my goal is to finish in the black, and that's an accounting term. And all that means is that when I get to the last day of the month and I've recorded all of my income, I've recorded all of my expenditures, I want to see that I have expended less than what I brought in. Now, it could be 16 cents less, it could be $16 less, it could be $160 less, but I want to have lived within the cash received for that defined period of time, that 1 month period of time. That's my goal. Like I said earlier, we use our budget to achieve multiple goals, not just finishing within the cash received for a 1 month period of time, but we can also use our budget for something that I think is really important. It's creating a lifestyle. If I don't have this already, I want to create a lifestyle with free cash. And what I mean by that is that the opposite is spending everything I make. So everything that comes in goes back out, and I'm down to almost zero with my checking account between paychecks, and I don't have any money to save. Maybe I have a savings account with $20 in it, and because everything I'm earning is going back out the door. If I'm budgeting, if I'm paying attention to my money, I'm going to see almost without question, in almost every case, I'll find ways that I can free up cash. And so I want a lifestyle that has chunks of free cash every month, free cash that I can do something with, savings, saving for a trip to Colorado next month, maybe building up my emergency savings, maybe building up some dollars because in a couple of years I want to buy a house. And so if I have free cash on a monthly basis, there's multiple beneficial things I can do with that cash. My budget will help me identify those dollars if I don't have them already. If I do have free cash already, it will help me identify even more dollars that I can free up for other purposes. Maybe I want to buy a car. I can promise you that every car dealer in Kansas will take cash for a car. Now, typically we think, okay, I'm going to go buy a new car and I'm going to finance it. And so for the next 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, I'm paying out hundreds of dollars a month for a vehicle. I can buy a pretty decent used car for $15,000. And if I wanted to, I could set up a separate savings account and put something like $312 a month into it for 4 years, earn a little bit of interest, not very much. And then at the end of 4 years, I've got $15,000 to pay cash for a vehicle. And you can usually get a pretty decent used vehicle for $15,000. Or I can finance it and over the next 4 years pay out $20,000, $21,000, $22,000. So I can use my budget for goals like that. Education. Are the kids going to be heading off to college one of these days, and I want to start putting some dollars aside into a 529? Well, in my budget, I create a 529 savings line item, and every month I'm sending some dollars to the 529. Debt reduction. One of the things that we preach a lot here at Housing and Credit Counseling is getting rid of debt. Because if I've got debt, whether it be credit card debt, unsecured loans, what have you, month after month after month, I'm paying other people. And I'd rather have those dollars for myself. Now, if I'm only making minimum payments and I have a 6-year car note, I'm going to be paying for 6 years. Well, maybe I want to do that in 3 years and get rid of that debt so I can free up some cash. My budget can help me to identify the free cash and to pay additional principal on a monthly basis so I can get out of debt quicker. One thing that we have a class here that we teach is called Social Security Will Not Be Enough. And I'm sure everybody listening in this evening is putting aside dollars for retirement. And I just like to refer to that as growing our wealth. And the idea isn't necessarily to become wealthy or rich or anything like that, but it is to recognize that when I get to that point, when I'm ready to stop working, if I'm relying on Social Security solely or primarily, then that's not going to be enough in virtually every case to provide me the lifestyle in retirement that I'm expecting. So we can use our budget to identify dollars that can go to retirement savings, like an IRA outside of our employment. Or we can free up cash so that we don't need as much of our paycheck on a monthly basis for living expenses so that we can increase our 401k contribution at work. So growing our wealth is something that is a long-term goal, but it's important, and we can use our budget to enhance what we're already doing. I mentioned before multiple savings accounts. It's important that we have at least 2 savings accounts and maybe even more. I've got enough savings accounts that sometimes I have to use my fingers to count how many I have. But we need at least 1 savings account for our emergency fund. Now, emergency funds, we've all heard about these for forever. But it's with the worldwide pandemic, we've seen how important having dollars set aside for emergencies, how important that can be. Now, probably none of us on this webinar tonight were expecting a worldwide pandemic. I've been surprised how many people actually were expecting it to happen at some point. But for the vast majority of us, we weren't thinking worldwide pandemic. But we could have anticipated losing a job. That happens all the time. Employer moves off to Mexico, there's a downsize or whatever, and we're out of work. Having an emergency fund with cash set aside for the emergencies that absolutely are going to occur. And it may not be a job loss. It could be a car breaking down, a hot water heater going out. There are things that happen to us all the time that require us to pay money out that we weren't expecting. Having an emergency fund to pay cash for those emergencies is critical. And we can use our budget to put that in place if we don't have it already. We have a fund, and when I say fund, emergency fund, it's a savings account. It could be a money market account if I have enough dollars in there that I can make sure I'm not worried about the minimum deposit requirements, but something I can get to quickly and transfer into my checking account right away if I need to. If I have an irregular income, and I'm thinking about the real estate agents, people that live on commissions, one thing that is also very important, especially for anybody with an irregular income, is to have essentially an emergency fund for the income. It's I call it a gap fund. It's an emergency fund to provide dollars for that month when I'm not anticipating any income or very little income coming in, certainly not enough to pay the monthly expenses. So I want an emergency fund for my monthly budget. And that's what the gap fund is. And so when I have a down month, or I can see a down month coming next month, and I'm building my budget, I've got some cash sitting over in savings that I can pull in to make sure the rent gets paid, the car payment gets paid, the utilities, the insurance, et cetera. Make sure we eat. And then when I have a good month, I want to make sure I get that replaced as quick as possible. And you need at least 1 month of living expense in that gap fund. The layaway fund is what most savings accounts are for households. We typically have just one savings account. We put money into it, we pull money back out. And so it's important to have one of those funds too. And so throughout the year, we have, for example, the holidays. We're going out buying a bunch of gifts. We have oil changes that take place during the year. And so if we can set dollars aside for those expenses that we know we're going to have, but they don't happen every month. If we could just be plugging a few dollars aside out of every paycheck into a savings account, knowing we're going to pull those dollars back out, that can often help the monthly budget. So I'm not having to reduce what we spend on food or things like that in that month. For example, when the Shawnee County Treasurer writes and says, Roger, next month you have to pay registration property tax on those vehicles. That happens every year. And so if I have dollars set aside to handle that, then when that time of year comes around, I can just pull those dollars out of savings if I can't cash flow it and pay for it that way. And then finally, our retirement savings. Now, these retirement savings, we don't want to retire or put our money into CDs or money markets or a money market account or a savings account. That's not where we put our retirement savings. That's not where the real money's at. But we want to make sure that we save for retirement just as we are for our other expenses. So income. Income is gross income, net income. Gross income, for example, if I get paid weekly, I work 40 hours a week, I earn $10 an hour. My gross income is 40 hours times $10 an hour, $400. It's what I earn before the deductions. My net income is what actually goes into my checking account. For budgeting purposes, we're going to use net income, the dollars that we actually see going into the checking account. And quite simply, a budget is comprised of just two things: projected net income and projected expenditures. So building the budget, best guess on the income. Sometimes we know the income for certain, especially if we're on fixed income or incomes. But otherwise, the income can fluctuate. And so best guess on the income, best guess on the expenditures. That's what makes up a budget. Now, with the expenses, we have different types of expenses. We've got our fixed expenses. Those are the expenses that are there every month and they don't change, or maybe they change rarely. So the rent or the mortgage, that's going to be usually good for a year. The phone, the car payments. We have certain expenses that we know exactly what we're going to have to pay next month. The variable expenses are there on a monthly basis, but they change. Sometimes they're pretty close to what they were the month before, sometimes not, but they're there every month and they're a little bit different every month. So your groceries, the gasoline we pump in the car, our utilities, those are the variable expenses. We're going to see them every month, but they're going to be a little bit different every month. And the intermittent expenses are like the tags and taxes, the gift buying, the holidays, the birthdays. Those are expenses that come up throughout the year. We expect them to come up throughout the year, but they're not there every month. And the important thing that intermittent expenses tell us is, or remind us, is that every month is different, which is why it's important to create a unique budget every single month. So if I'm building a budget for December, it's going to be a little bit different than my budget for November. There's going to be some things in it that are the same, some things in it that are different. Maybe I traveled this month, and next month I'm not traveling, but maybe I have an oil change next month. So I'm always thinking ahead, especially for those intermittent expenses that I can anticipate in the following month. So we're going to talk about the two pieces of a budget. The first piece being to create a budget. And the first thing we need to do in creating a budget is determining, now normally it's going to be the first day of the month, and then of course it's going to end on the last day of the month. It doesn't have to. You can start your budget on the 15th of one month and end it on the 14th of the next month if there's a good reason to do that. But normally you're going to look at the first of the month through the end of the month. Now we want to also create our budget, build our budget before the month starts. Now for me, that's typically sometime the last week of the month. I'll sit down and knock out my budget for the next month, usually in about 10 minutes. If I haven't been budgeting before, it might take me a little bit longer, the first few months. But once you've been budgeting for a while, in 10 uninterrupted minutes, you can build a budget for the next month. You start to get into that habit of thinking what's going to happen next month, and especially with the intermittent expenses. Now, when we build a budget, what's very important is that we always start with our projected income. Now, I may have child support coming in. I may have other sources of money. Maybe I have a family member living with me and they're giving me some money, but I'm going to have paychecks. And so oftentimes, or not oftentimes, always, when I build my budget for the next month, the first thing I do is look at the calendar. How many times am I going to get paid in the month of December? Is it 2 times or is it 3 times? If I'm working, being paid weekly, am I going to be paid 4 times next month or 5 times next month? But when we're building the budget, we always start with projected income. So here is an example of a budget. Let's say I work for ABC Corporation, and for the time frame May 1 to May 31, I expect to be paid twice. I have no other income I expect to see during the month of May, and I'm guessing that my income is going to be $1,200 net on 2 occasions during the month of May, and the total is $2,400. So how much do I expect to receive? I total it up. That's my starting point for building a budget. You'll notice that I have nothing plugged in for expenditures at this point. Start with the income first. Now, once I've determined what I think I'm going to receive in income, I start dispersing that income in the expenditures, and I want to prioritize. So, for example, the first place I disperse the $2,400 I think I'm going to get isn't going to be in going to the Chiefs game or going out for pizza or things like that. It's going to be the priorities: my rent, my insurance, utilities, food, insurance. Those are my important things. So I'm going to start dispersing what I think I'm going to spend in the following month with the priorities. I want to continue dispersing and entering projected expenditures in my budget until I can achieve balance with the projected income. So if you recall, projected income for the month of May is going to be $2,400. I want to disperse every penny of that $2,400 somewhere in the expenditures. And with the adjustments I'm almost certainly going to have to make, I'll eventually end up with a budget that is in balance. And so if you notice here, total income projected at $2,400, and my total projected expenditures, once I'm done building my budget, also $2,400. We heard the term zero-based budgeting. This is an example of zero-based budgeting. I've dispersed every penny I think I'm going to get. That's my plan for the month. Now, I can promise you that to some degree, what I planned out, for example, on the groceries and the utilities and gasoline, things like that, I can promise you that what I actually end up spending from the first of the month through the end of the month will be different. It'll be higher, it'll be lower, but that's okay. But this is my plan and for the month. Now, once the month starts, I've already built my budget. Now, once the first of the month gets here, I want to start managing my budget. Sounds complicated, sounds time consuming. It's not. It's very easy. If I'm not doing this already, really the trick is to get into the habit of doing it. But time-wise, it takes no time at all to manage a budget, and it's not complicated. All I need to do is keep track of everything and timely enter that information into my budget. So if I stop at the quick shop and I spend $7.14, what does the clerk always ask me before I leave? Do I want a receipt? Well, yes, I'll take that receipt. So take the receipt, or I write down on a piece of paper $7.14. When I get home, I take that dollar amount and I key it into my budget. Or if I'm using a paper budget, I write it down. It takes no time at all. And that's all managing the budget is timely, same day, next day, entering into my budget all the income I've actually received and all the expenditures I've actually made. Now, if you recall, when we were creating the budget, we were doing some guessing on certain expenditures. When we're managing the budget from the first through the end of the month, these are all real numbers. They're to the penny numbers. So I don't want to round up or down. I don't want to leave anything out, and I want to do it timely. If I wait until the end of the month to key everything in, it's not going to work. If I leave stuff out, it's not going to work. If I round up or down, it's not going to work. But the time it takes to do this is just no time at all. I love this picture of this friendly young lady brushing her teeth, because I tell people all the time, honestly, I will spend more time on an average daily basis brushing my teeth than what it takes for me to manage my budget, because I don't spend money 20 times a day. Some days, not at all. And so on the days I do spend money, maybe it's once, twice, 3 times. But the time it takes to get a receipt or check for an auto pay or a telepay out of my account, or things of that nature, and then transfer those dollar amounts into my budget, takes just hardly any time at all. And so budgeting is very simple and very, very effective, and it takes no time at all. So I get to the end of my month, end of the month, and including savings as an expenditure. So I want to make sure that when I move out of my checking account into a savings account is considered an expenditure. But with savings included as an expenditure, I want to hit my goal as of the last day of the month of expending less than what I brought in. And then I move on and do it the next month, and then do it the next month after that, and the month after that. And after a while, after I've been budgeting for 3 or 4 or 5 months, it becomes a habit. I tell people that I'm old enough to remember when we didn't have to wear seatbelts. In fact, most cars didn't have seatbelts. So when back in the early 80s, when the move was to have everybody wear seatbelts, you kind of had to get used to that. But it became a habit. It just became part of what you do. You get into the car, you put on your seatbelt. And the idea of now of driving down a highway at 70 miles an hour without a seatbelt is just, gosh, I'm not going to do that. Same thing with budgeting. If you can start it and keep doing it and stick with it 3, 4, 5 months where it becomes a habit, and you're going to see right away the benefit of doing it. But if you can do that and keep doing it, eventually it's going to be something that you just do. It's what you do to manage your money. So here is that budget for the May 1 to May 31 timeframe. You'll notice in the actual column, actual income, actual expenditures, this is the column in which we manage our budget from the first through the end of the month. You'll notice that these are all real numbers. Now, I've hit my goal for savings, and I've made the other expenditures. You'll notice that the groceries in this case came in a little bit higher than what I guessed the groceries would be for the month, and the gasoline's a little bit lower. That's okay. We don't have a grocery budget. We have a grocery line item. We don't have a gasoline budget. We have a gasoline line item. The two numbers that matter in a budget are as of the last day of the month, the total of actual income, in this case, $2,495.06. And as of the last day of the month, the total of expenditures, $2,476.52. So for the month of May, I finished in the black, in this case by $18.54. And then you move on and do it for June. So the two numbers that really matter, I want to hit my goals. I don't want to deplete my savings so that I can spend more to go see the Chiefs, for example. But I've hit my goals and I finished in the black. And so I've done well for the month of May. Now let's go do it for the month of June. Now I use this slide here to show you that a budget does not have to be fancy. In fact, with budgeting, the simpler, the better. There's plenty of apps out there that will have pie charts that show me how much I spend for groceries and for rent and things like that. And if that's all I'm relying upon, I'm probably not going to be satisfied with what it does for me. So with budgeting, simple works. And a piece of paper with a pencil and a calculator can work just fine. It doesn't have to be fancy. Now, it's easier if I can use a spreadsheet or something electronic that calculates numbers for me, but I can do it literally on a blank piece of paper with a pencil and a calculator, and the process is exactly the same. Gets a little bit sloppy, but I could achieve the same goals with this type of budget form. Now, in summary, just want to touch on a couple of things. One, what a budget won't do me, and two, what a budget will do for me. Now, a budget won't stop me from creating debt, using my credit cards. A budget can help me to get out of debt. It will be something I use to make sure that my minimum payment at least is paid on a monthly basis. But it's not going to keep me from creating debt, but it can certainly help me get out of debt if that's one of my goals. Like we talked about earlier, a budget certainly will help me to create monthly free cash because the very first month, I'm going to see where all my money's going. I talk to a lot of people that make good money, and the refrain, we don't know where our money goes. We should have more money. I hear that all the time. And it's the nickel and dime stuff. It's the coffees on the way to work. It's the drive-throughs at McDonald's. It's the expenses, the kind of the hidden expenses that just kind of sap money out of the checking account. If I'm budgeting and I'm doing it like we have discussed this evening, very first month, I'm going to see where my money's going. And to what degree. When I put together my first budget, I go back through my checking account register for the last 3 months, for example, I'm going to start seeing where my money's going. So a budget's going to help me to identify that discretionary spending that I can certainly cut back on if I'm looking to create free cash if I don't have it already, or even more free cash. I'm going to see the discretionary spending that I can dial back on. What a budget will also help me to do is to create and maintain a 100% cushion in my checking account so that I can stop living paycheck to paycheck. And the reason I have this on this slide is that 8 out of 10 of us are living paycheck to paycheck. It's a very stressful way to live. But that's the way the vast majority of us here in America live. And all that means is that I need to use this paycheck to pay the rent, and then I need to use the next paycheck to pay maybe the car loan payment or some other big payment. And because I don't have enough extra money in my checking account to pay those whenever I want to pay those. So the opposite of living paycheck to paycheck is being able to pay my bills whenever I want to because I have enough cushion in my checking account. So what a budget will help me to do is to create either in short term or over a period of time, basically a savings account within my checking account. And I want to get that up to about 100%. Doesn't have to be exactly 100%. Could be a little bit less, a little bit more. But if I have an extra stash of cash sitting in my checking account comparable or equal to what I normally spend on a monthly basis, then theoretically I could pay all my bills, groceries, rent, gasoline, utilities. I could pay everything first day of the month and still not get down to zero. That's not how we live. How we live is we got a balance in our checking account and we pay a bill, balance comes down, we get paid, it goes back up. And so that's what we do throughout the month. But the benefit of having that cushion is I don't have to wait for a paycheck to come in to make a payment. I don't have to worry if my check's going to bounce because my paycheck may not hit the bank before the payment does. I may not have to worry about a late payment fee because I can't make the payment because I don't have enough money in my checking account. If I can create that cushion and maintain it, then I can live like the 20% that don't live paycheck to paycheck. And so the budget can help me do that. And it can help me maintain it. There's sometimes I will receive a big tax refund, say $5,000, $8,000. And maybe I throw all that money into my checking account, and for a period of time, I don't have to live paycheck to paycheck. So I get a big tax refund in February, and for 3 months, 4 months, 2 months, 8 months, for some period of time, I've got this extra cash sitting in my checking account, and I'm not living paycheck to paycheck, but what happens in virtually every single case is that over a period of time, that cushion is depleted. It goes away. And the reason it goes away and I'm back living paycheck to paycheck is because I am spending more on a monthly basis than I'm bringing in. So what I don't want to do is create a cushion and then deplete it. I want to create a cushion and maintain it so that I never again have to live paycheck to paycheck. And the way I maintain it is with a budget. Month after month after month, I spend less than what I brought in. 16 cents less, $16 less, $160 less. If I just spend less for that 1 month period of time and then do it for the next month, the next month, the next month, I'll never deplete that cushion. In fact, that cushion will slowly grow over time. So that's how we create the cushion, and that's how we maintain the cushion, and that's how we cannot live paycheck to paycheck. Okay, you guys have been great. Thank you for sitting in on our webinar. A little bit about housing and credit counseling. We do a variety of things, like Marilyn said. I work on the financial side of things, so work with the consumer credit and the home buyer, but we also have the HOPE program. That's a local program here in Shawnee County or the Shawnee County area. We do tenant landlord in a lot of places across the state. And then, like Marilyn said, a big part of what we do is education. Everything's webinar these days, nothing in person, but one of these days we'll be back doing in-person classes. But you guys have been awesome. And Dylan, do we have any questions from the audience?
Well, yes, sir, Rogers. But first, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening and helping to educate everyone on such an important topic as budgeting. We've received some great questions during your presentation, but as we move into the Q&A portion of the program, FYI, you all will be seeing some polling questions coming across your screens. If you could please take the time to answer those polls while Rogers fields your questions, that'd be much appreciated. Rogers, are you ready to take some questions?
I am, Dylan. I appreciate that. And I failed to mention one thing. If I can advance the slide, one more slide.
You got it.
Okay. This is my contact information here at HCCI. And I do this with every class where, whether it's a budgeting class or one where we just mention budgeting as a part of the class. If anybody on the webinar this evening would like a pretty basic budgeting workbook, it's in Excel, and a simple one-page Word document that recites the steps that we talked about tonight, I'd be happy to send that to them. They just need to shoot me an email. Don't need a big message, just I'd like the budgeting stuff, and I'll send it back. And beyond that, if anybody starts budgeting and they want some help, they'll have my email account, they'll have my telephone number, and reach out to me at any time, and I'll help anybody that wants to start budgeting and is looking for some feedback as they get started. Thank you, Dylan.
You betcha.
Yeah, I'm ready for questions.
All right, sounds good. And speaking of questions, we just had a bunch come in, so we'll see if we can make time for everything here. I mentioned those polling questions. We're going to go ahead and get those on the screen here. So if we can all multitask, I'll go ahead and get us started here. So our first question we received, Rogers, do you recommend budgeting tools like Simplify or Quicken?
I'm not familiar with those. I've heard of Quicken, have not heard of Simplify. I guess what I tell people, Dylan, it's a great question. I tell people I don't care what tool somebody uses, whether it be something we've produced or somebody else produces, as long as it does what we talked about tonight. So if you can find something that works for you, and it's something you like to use, and it allows for the creation of a budget, and it allows for the management of the budget, I'd say use whatever you want to use as long as it can do what we talked about tonight.
Excellent. Okay, I'm still trying to get through all these questions that just came in here. The next one, you had a handwritten budget example. That example had a credit card expense line. Would that just be the interest charges, since I assume each individual purchase made with a credit card would be categorized according to the appropriate line item, so groceries, eating out, clothes, utilities, etc.?
Yeah, another good question. When we're dealing with a budget, we're talking about cash in, cash out. So with, for example, with the credit card, I would not be tracking the actual credit card expenditures. What I'd be tracking on the budget would be what I'm paying on a monthly basis as debt service for that account. So my minimum payment or something over a minimum payment, whatever I'm paying on a monthly basis to the bank that issued the card, as opposed to the actual card expenditures.
Excellent. We had another great one that just came in. I'm going to highlight it first. I feel like I can budget for work well, but I can't manage my household budget because work budgets have more limiters. How do I work on that?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Sounds like maybe we're talking about a situation where we're mixing we've got the work income and expenses coming into the same account basically as what we have for household. If that's the case, say I'm a small business owner and I have a small business, I want to make sure that I have a separation between my business expenses, my business income, and what I'm using for household expenses. So maybe having a separate, if that's the question, I want to make sure that there's separation between the two. So I'm paying myself basically a salary, and then I use that salary that I pay out of my business account into a separate checking account for my household expenses, if that makes sense.
And it occurs to me they could also mean maybe they're in charge of budgeting for expenses at their business, right? So at their place of employment, they're in charge of budgeting there, and they make things, maybe it works better there than in the home. That's how I interpreted it.
Okay, yeah.
Some of the questions that we've received might be best addressed to you. So before we close things down here, we will flash up your contact slide again, if that works for you, Rogers. I think that
Sure.
might be good.
Yeah.
So some of the questions that we've gotten here. Oh, okay. And I just received a word from that question asker. Technical terminology here that was, I think maybe my interpretation was correct. But at any rate, they have been helped. So we will move on.
Okay.
So here's a great, simple question, right? What should be a bigger priority, saving or paying off debt?
Well, that's a great question. It kind of depends on, do I have any savings right now? If I have nothing set aside for emergencies, then I want to make sure I'm making make the minimum payments, but bust it, free up all the cash I can, get some dollars set aside for saving for emergencies. And then after I've got $1,000 set aside for emergencies, pays for anything under the hood, it'll pay for a hot water heater. As soon as I've got some dollars set aside for emergencies, then I want to make debt repayment my priority. So it depends. If I have savings already, then at that point, debt repayment is going to be the priority with the free cash.
Okay. And we'll go ahead and get into our last question here, as we're about 10 to the hour. It's probably a situation that a few people find themselves in. I never seem to be able to budget accurately for food costs, no matter how much I try to account for eating out or buying groceries. I don't want to just keep increasing that line item. Do you have any advice?
Yeah. If I don't have enough, with the eating out and things like that, I don't have to spend that money. Now, I do have to buy food at the grocery store, got to eat. But if I'm seeing those expenses going up and up and up, then maybe I stop spending that money. And so again, now in general, when I'm budgeting for the groceries, when I'm budgeting for dining out, because we all go out to eat, what I want to do is to try to live within that budget. And if I'm keeping track of everything timely, I'm going to see as the month goes along, if I've set aside $50 a month for dining out, I'm going to see as the month goes along where I'm at relative to what I've budgeted. And then the key there is then the discipline that comes with budgeting that, okay, well, I'm at my $50 or I'm close to it. I'm not dining out the rest of the month. I'm going to try to live within the budget. Again, with the line items, the variable expenses, I'm going to finish under or over on every one of those variable line items. The key is to try to get as close as I can and to be as realistic as possible. Now, maybe with the groceries, maybe my hope is to live within, say, $250, but I just can't do it. And as much as I cut back, as much as I do to try to live within $250, maybe it's more realistic to be $275 or $300. And so I just need to recognize that. And then there's probably somewhere else in my budget that I'm going to need to dial back on to make sure that I finish in the black on a monthly basis.
Right. Yeah, excellent question. And again, I think that's one that a lot of people find themselves in. I know I said just one more question, but we had another fantastic one we're going to squeak in here,
Sure.
right under the gun here. So utility companies often offer paying a balanced amount each month based on the monthly average of the previous year. Do you recommend this or paying each month based on the actual usage that fluctuates more?
Yeah, that's for budgeting purposes. Level pay is how that's often described. Is a really easy way to budget, and because the gas bill, the electric bill is going to be about the same every month. There might be an adjustment on an annual basis, but you have a pretty good idea what you're going to pay. Now, you're not going to see a whole lot of benefit from changing the thermostat, which is how we can save money with utilities. So if I'm not on level pay, I might see a dramatic change in the utilities just by where I set the thermostat. So you're not going to see that kind of benefit. But for budgeting purposes, level pay is pretty sweet because you have a really good idea from month to month what you're going to be paying.
Speaking of setting the thermostat, it is really cold down in my basement, but that means I'm also saving money, right? So I mentioned we're going to flash your contact information back up on the screen here because I'm sorry, we received so many great questions and there's just so little time. But Rogers, you're welcome to fill in your email inbox, right?
Yep. Be happy to respond to all the questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for being here. We're going to welcome Marty and Marilyn back. But again, thank you for donating this time to us, Rogers. I really appreciate it. I know a ton of people have found this to be really helpful. So Marilyn and Marty, I think you have some closing words for us.
I do. Thank you, Dylan. Rogers, thank you again for your awesome presentation. And Dylan, thank you for your moderation. And thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. For those who are interested in learning more about budgeting using Mint.com, which is a free budgeting tool, a free online budgeting tool, Johnson County Library will be presenting a class on Mint.com on January 21st, 2021. More details will be available on our website starting in mid to late December. So please check that out. Also, our next Money Mondays webinar is on January 25th from 6 to 7 p.m. Angel Zimmerman of Zimmerman and Zimmerman will present Let's Get Out of Debt. And there will be more Money Mondays webinars presented in February through May 2021. And details on those upcoming webinars can be found now on the HCCI website and later in December on the Johnson County Library website. And a reminder, HCCI offers free counseling by phone and Zoom to Kansas residents. So do take advantage of that if that's something that you could use. Have a great week, everyone.